Last year in 2024, as we were heading into it, I was in Vancouver and I was pretty bullish on the markets, not because I have a lot of respect for them, but because they're very Pavlovian. I was saying risk on. Powell's already making it pretty clear he has no choice but to cut rates in 2024. That's obviously a tailwind short term for the S&P and the stock market, and that's exactly what the markets did last year. This year, I'm far more risk off and far more bearish because as the facts change, your opinions change. And, keep it simple. We could spend all afternoon talking about market risk, but look at the Buffett indicator, just the total market cap to GDP, and we're at all-time highs in the Buffett indicator, over 202%. This is the best single measure of where valuations stand at any given moment, and we're seeing massive overvaluation, usually followed by a severe fall. And we could talk about yield curves and overvaluation of Nvidia, but the applied future return, including dividends, based on the Buffett indicator is 0% for 2025. Now, could be wrong, could be up or down, but I don't think it's going to be far from that. The QE solution of just printing instant liquidity to solve it, even if they did that, would require a lot more QE than before. And that, of course, just destroys the currency. They're all tied together. You have to look also when guys like Bezos are selling their stocks, or Nvidia's CEO is selling their stocks, or when Berkshire Hathaway is going to cash. Those are pretty smart guys in the room, whatever you think of them. And there's a lot of insider selling, but it's clearly all bubbles pop. We're certainly at the top right now based on the Buffett indicator. And looking at the most important sovereign bond in the world, the 10-year U.S. Treasury, it's been a 10-year secular decline. And now it's underwater when measured against inflation. So you're losing money on the 10-year U.S. Treasury. Not a coincidence that Bank of International Settlements made gold a tier 1 asset right next to the 10-year, because the 10-year isn't a reserve strategic savings asset. Gold is a better savings asset. So yeah, we've got major market risk, and I'm much more bearish than I was a year ago based on these trends that are changing and becoming obvious. And to your point, when a market crashes, it takes a long time to get back to where you started. So you've got to be careful about the market risk. On the political risk, I was just reading a German paper. I'm not a big fan of Olaf Scholz, but as you know, he's been band-aiding a coalition government. It's a financial mess. Germany makes up 1% of the world population, but it's the third strongest economy in the world, however depressed it is. It's a very fleeced, a very hardworking culture. It's being hoodwinked by its government and its debt policy. It's very sad. But the political risk is, I see in the U.S., certainly a major swing from the left to the right. Many will say, well, that's because progressive policies have failed, the lockdowns, the weaponization of the legal system, the censorship, the media, the woke movement, the kind of self-censorship gone too far, and there's been a political shift to the right because of that. I think it has more to do with money. I think it's more about populism. People are broke. Another simple fact, Ontario, wealthiest province in Canada, its GDP per capita is less than the state of Mississippi, which is the poorest state in America. So hardworking Canadians, like hardworking Americans, are getting crushed by debt. They're getting crushed by low quality of life, a debased currency, and they're voting with their pocketbooks now. And the cost of their housing and the cost of their credit cards, the cost of their cars but their wages are not, and their currencies are getting weaker and the inflation is getting stronger. So even when you look at markets, when you look at politics, they're cracking. And it's unfortunate. I was cryptically not trying to be smug, but I said during the election period, it's Santa Claus, Papa Smurf, Mother Teresa, Albert Einstein. It doesn't matter who's in the White House. The problems facing whoever was going to be elected are going to be massive. Trump has tremendous confidence, tremendous desire to make change. I think what we can say, there were certainly the opinion that whoever was in the White House in the last 4 years wasn't doing much. Whatever you think of Trump, love him or hate him, and it's a very polarized question to ask any room in any conversation in America or Europe these days. You can't say that he isn't going to try, that he isn't going to do things. Well, that he'll be successful is very different. This Department of Government Efficiency with Vivek and Musk, very controversial, cutting jobs in D.C. Well, 25% of U.S. GDP comes from government. So if you cut jobs, it's also going to be inflationary, I think. If you have a tariff issue, there's debate, that's still inflation. It's expensive. So to your point, it's going to be very hard for him to do this without incredible spending. The Greenland thing, and also let's just get the Panama Canal back. Yeah. You can understand the optics of that. We paid for it. It's beneficial. We're not getting the rent from it. It makes a lot of sense optically. Politically, to your point, whether it's Greenland and Russia and ending the war in Ukraine, or getting the Panama Canal back, or exporting or repatriating every illegal alien that came in with a criminal record, those are optically important things that make sense. But to actually get them accomplished, and certainly in the first 2 years before the next midterm elections, without spending a fortune, running into political roadblocks, or massively creating an inflationary problem in America, or even the deflation of a recession which is coming, it's impossible to know how any one man or regime can solve all that in 2 years or 4 years. One thing about Trump, he isn't going to be running for re-election, so he's going to do the best he can. But to my point, cryptically, it's not about being anti-Trump, and no one can do that easily. And no one can predict how Putin's going to react, how Panama's going to react, how Greenland's going to react, or where the world goes. But what we both agree on is when society gets desperate, when people are broke, when their purchasing power is worse, centralization kicks in, scapegoating kicks in, distraction kicks in, inflation kicks in, oftentimes war kicks in. Now, Trump doesn't want a war with Putin, I'm sure of that. But again, we have a lot of unknowns that you and I and no one can say with certainty are going to play out in the next 4 years, in the next 2 years. What we do know, what I think I can say without regard to partisan politics, is that none of these things can be done for free. All of these things are going to require more fiscal spending, more debt, and more monetization of that debt through the debasement of the purchasing power of your currency, whether that's in the Canadian system, whether that's in the British system, in the Japanese system, and certainly at the home of the world reserve currency. So that all roads lead to inflation, as Paul Tudor Jones said. They also lead to gold because it's an antidote to fiat money destroyed by debt. We're racing towards global debt of 400 trillion, with only 1/3 of that in GDP. Obviously, with the 400 trillion in debt is the fact that in the last 20 years, the global money supply has gone up by 5x. When you add that much water to the wine, you dilute the flavor. When you add that much money supply to the global currencies, you dilute the purchasing power. So again, all of these things, politics, markets, debt, war, they all lead to some type of currency debasement. And that all leads to the conversation on gold. It isn't gold bugging anymore. It's history, Egan. When the facts are bad, we lie. It's not sensational to say that the Bureau of Labor Statistics definition of inflation is accurate. It's totally inaccurate. It's not sensational to say that the temporary inflation promise of Jerome Powell, that was a lie. It was a lie when Nixon said that going off the gold standard would be temporary and have no effect on your dollar. These are things that are just open now, hiding in plain sight, lies that no one talks about. The compounding effect of real inflation is far higher than what the government tells you. That's not trying to be anti-political or anti-American or anti-Swiss or anti-European. It's just being common sense honest. We all feel it. And to your point too, we had a major banking crisis 2 years ago. No one talks about it anymore. Credit Suisse bailed out. Those are 3 of the 4 largest bank failures in America. No one talks about it. Honest guys like Thomas Hernick will say our banking system is extremely weak when you look at its capital to assets ratios. The number of non-performing loans on the balance sheet of U.S. and Chinese banks are appalling. The labor markets that were so strong all year, according to Powell and Yellen, and they just revised it all backwards at the end of the year. These are open lies that people are feeling, even if they don't study the markets. They feel it at Walmart. They feel it at the car lot. A Ford 150 maxed out is $130,000 for a pickup truck. Come on. How are you going to do that when wages aren't keeping up with inflation? So all these things are signs of failed government, failed debt, failed currencies, for which gold always gets the last laugh, not smugly, but gold doesn't do anything but hold its value, while currencies are very busy losing their value to monetize the debts of criminally negligent governments and central banks. These are all important risk themes, all of them, and we can't be castigated as just doom and gloom. I was bullish and bearish on different things, but the trend is obviously dark right now, and no one party or person can save us, but we can act as our own central bankers, our own common sense, our own politicians over our own lives, whether that's financially, morally, or personally. You can take control of your own life. You can be your own central bank. Don't wait for someone else to save you when you can do your own things.